I'm very happy to start and invite Nivine Sandouka to give her presentation.
Thanks, Liam. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry we're starting 20 minutes late. So basically, as my colleague Liel said, I'll be starting by giving a general introduction about 1325 in general, what it is and the background for it, but then more specifically, I'll go deeply into the Palestinian status of women in 1325, and are there any political participation for women? What is the status over there in occupied Palestine? And then we'll see if there's a possibility for women to actually be part of the negotiation teams or not. So we'll go back a little bit in history to 1995, to the Beijing Platform for Action. And that contained an entire chapter focused on women, peace, and security. During the 90s, the NGO community was increasingly concerned about the negative impacts of war on women, particularly widespread sexual violence seen in civil wars in Bosnia, West Africa, and Rwanda. Activists were also upset that women faced significant barriers to entering peace talks and the negative impacts that women experienced post-conflict. The Beijing Conference 5th anniversary provided critical momentum for progress on women, peace, and security issues at the UN itself. From 1995 until 2000, there has been several studies and discussions within the UN itself, until the Security Council adopted the resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security on the 31st of October 2000. The resolution reaffirms the important role of women in the prevention and resolution of conflicts, peace, negotiations, peace building, peacekeeping, humanitarian response, and in post-conflict reconstruction, and stresses the importance of their equal participation and full involvement in all efforts for the maintenance and promotion of peace and security. Resolution 1325 urges all actors to increase the participation of women and incorporate gender perspectives in all United Nations special measures to protect women and girls from gender-based violence, particularly rape and other forms of sexual abuse in situations of armed conflict. The resolution provides a number of important operational mandates with implications for member states and the entities of the United Nations system. After the year 2000, there has been also discussions and other resolutions that passed, and those resolutions, we call them like sister resolutions of 1325. One of those resolutions was actually in the year 2009, and its number is 1889. And this specific resolution calls for the Secretary General to develop a set of indicators to track the implementation of 1325. So basically there are 4 main pillars or indicators that were developed during that year. And the 4 main pillars are prevention, protection, participation, and relief and recovery. I'll just say very briefly. Prevention, it says that focuses on preventing sexual and gender-based violence, as well as raising gender awareness in conflict, and creating early warning systems. For the protection, it means involves improving women and girls' safety, physical, mental health, economic security, and overall well-being. For the participation, which is the purpose of this gathering today, it refers to promoting women's participation in peace processes, increasing the numbers of women at all levels of decision-making institutions, and increasing partnerships with local women's organizations. Participation also includes increasing women's participation in the UN in senior positions, as special representatives and in peacekeeping missions and operations, which might actually give us a hint why now they're talking that the Secretary General should be a woman as well, or like so many women are also nominees. And the final pillar is the relief and recovery efforts should ensure equal distribution of aid to women and girls and incorporate gender perspectives into relief and recovery efforts. So from there, these 4 different indicators, something else should be developed to measure whether we're actually meeting those indicators or not, and we refer to this as the national action plans. So it was 2 years after the launch of 1325, the United Nations Security Council began encouraging the development of national action plans. We refer to them as NAPs. So whenever we talk about NAPs, it's the national action plans, as a tool that member states should use to detail steps that they will take to fulfill the resolution's objectives. As of September 2016, 63 countries have adopted such plans. The NAPs address political, social, and human security policies and often require interagency coordination. Iraq, occupied Palestine, and Israel in the Middle East have developed national action plans. And amongst the most advanced in developing those are, of course, European countries and African countries. So let's move to the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. What you wanted? So this presentation is based on participatory action research that was conducted by Women's Affairs Technical Committee in 2015. It's also based on different references from official websites of the Palestinian Authority. So it kind of like covers what's happening right now, but also analysis of why those things are happening. So I just wanted to mention something, that the mobilization of women in Israel and Palestine and their involvement in the peace process really began during the 80s. The Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982 provoked movements among Jewish women opposing the conflict. Moreover, the first Intifada in 1987 saw the formation of Jewish women's organizations such as Women in Black, Israeli Women Against Occupation, and Women's Peace Net. The Palestinian women's organizations, which until then focused on the needs of the Palestinian community regarding education and social services, began to work together with the Israeli Jewish women in order to bring an end to the Arab-Israeli conflict. In 1989, which is like before Madrid and before Oslo, Israeli and Palestinian women met in Brussels and evoked the importance of the resolution of the conflict through negotiations, Israel's recognition of Palestinian representatives, and a mutual recognition of peace. These women thus called for a two-state solution to the conflict before any other official representative. And during the first Intifada itself, the Palestinian women played an equal role to that of men. There was no differentiation between the role of men and the role of women. It was actually they're all together in the first Intifada, and especially within the Palestinian Liberation Organization as well. If we look at the legal framework within the Palestinian Authority about women's participation, all the legal documents affirm the equal right of men and women to participate in the political process and the decision-making at all levels. Those documents include the Modified Basic Law, which is like a constitution for us, the Declaration of Independence, the electoral law, and labor law. And of course, the PA ratified UN Security Resolution 1325. The resolution itself has many people who criticize it on the Palestinian side, but for those who are with the resolution, they say that it creates a platform which allows the Palestinian feminist movement to have their voices heard, whereby they can demand the Security Council and the General Secretary to provide protection for the Palestinian women and to holding Israel as an occupying power accountable. In addition, the Palestinian women can demand for fact-finding missions which hinder the implementation of the resolution and breaches to such a resolution as well. The resolution also provides the Palestinian feminist movement with a platform to participate in the reconciliation committees and in the negotiation teams as well. And in order for the feminist movement to take advantage of such a resolution, the first conference was held in 2011 to start discussion around the NAP, the National Action Plan, and how they're actually going to use it. And then let's go move a little bit to Oslo, back to Oslo. And after Oslo, unfortunately, most of the women who were actually active during the first Intifada were sidelined. in a sense that women issues are not a priority, women issues should wait until we get independence. And so most of them actually started working more in the NGO sector. And even within the NGO sector, by the year 2012, we had 3,000 institutions in the in the Palestinian territories. And only 15% of those were concerned with gender-related issues. And when I say gender-related issues, it's more about violence against women, social issues, raising awareness around rights, but not actual political participation. I'll also speak more about some figures now and trends, and then we'll go to the analysis of why that is really happening in the Palestinian Authority, or the Palestinian territories. So there's Article 4 of the Law on Public Legislative Elections of 2005. This guarantees the representation of women in electoral lists, while Article 17 of the Palestinian Law on Local Council Elections guarantees that women hold 20% of the seats in the local bodies. So we have a quota of 20%. So, but what is the reality right now is that in 2006 general elections, only 13% of the seats were for women, not 20% like the quota said. The General Union of Women right now in Palestine is aiming to raise the quota to 30% because they believe if they, through law, are able to raise the quota to 30%, if we have elections, we'll be able to get a 20%. So, and then you have 46% of the voters at the 2006 elections were actually women, almost half. And the thing is, studies show that it's actually women who voted for Hamas. Women at the local councils were not active as, when there were meetings held at the local councils, we call them village councils or municipality councils. Those where the women actually were only there by name, because due to tradition, the meetings were held at night. So women could not actually leave their houses at night and go and participate in those meetings. In other instances, when they were able to finally participate, they would remain silent. In other cases, their husbands or brother or son would attend on her own behalf. So basically, even if there was women elected, a number, but there was no quality. And also, if you study like the recent 2016 elections, council elections that were due in October, and they were cancelled, they also witnessed a backlash in women's participation. Because if you look at the lists, even Fatah lists, they were referring to women as the wife of, not her name, or the sister, but not her name. Just because there's a law that says you should have women.
Flowers.
And the picture were flowers. Thank you for the reminder. If you look at the cabinet, Palestinian cabinet, there's only 3 women ministers out of 21 seats. And of course, the women, in most of the cases, they get the softer ministries, like the Women Affairs, Ministry of Women Affairs, Ministry of Tourism, and in this case, we also have a Ministry of Economy. Refugee camps residents make up 9.3% of the Palestinian population and do not participate in local council elections. Most refugee camps are run by committees that have no female representation and to which the quota regime even does not apply. Women occupy 40% of public positions, most of them in medium levels versus top positions. So it's very rare that you will see them getting to the high positions. Women make up 4.3% of the Palestinian ambassadors, yani almost 4% only of Palestinian ambassadors, and 11% of judges. 2 women were appointed in 2003 as in high positions in the Sharia courts. Despite that a woman has risen in the ranks to head a Palestinian political party, we have 1 Palestinian woman who heads a political party, yet the female representation in all other parties is really minimal or remains low. On average, women make up an average of 16% of the top leadership in political factions of Fatah, the Popular Front of Liberation of Palestine, and the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So again, they only reach a certain level in decision making, but not the top positions. Women hold 8% of the seats in the Palestinian National Council. 10 women are members on the Central Committee of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and 1 woman sits on its executive committee. If we look at university student councils, despite being an incubator for political leadership and political training, female participation in student councils in Palestinian universities averages only to 26%, although they are half of the population or half of the students. Palestinian women, in particular, prisoners, residents of Jerusalem, and the areas adjacent to the barrier, or to the separation wall, or to the wall, apartheid wall, as well as areas classified as Area C, are subject to systematic violations by the Israeli occupation and the settlers of their basic rights. Therefore, of the rights that are guaranteed by the different international humanitarian law and conventions. What is good, that the PA launched its first national action plan in early September 2016. Unfortunately, I was not able to get a hold of a copy yet. In terms of prisoners, we have 57 female prisoners in Israeli jails, whereby 13 of them are underage, the youngest of which is 12 years old. If we kind of look at the analysis, so I referred previously to this participatory action research that took place in 2015. This participatory action research covered 30 locations from West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. And most of the people believe that social barriers and tradition play an essential role in limiting women's equal access to opportunities of participation. For example, 83% agree that tradition rules what the role of women should be within the society. Almost 60% of this 80% are actually women. 50% agree that the religion affects the participation of women in public life. 77% agree that occupation and its policies prevent women from participating, because women who would be imprisoned or would go to prison, they will later on have a stigma that they were in prison, something is wrong. 73% agree that financial resources or lack of financial resources prevents women from participating. 80% believe that women's reproductive responsibility, that is taking care of the family, of the house, prevent women from participating, as well as the lack of family support to resume such roles, in addition to women's lack of capacity and their skills and knowledge needed to actually participate, because in Palestine, usually we also have specific educational fields that women can study, opposing others. Like, for example, most of the Palestinian families prefer their daughters to become teachers, because a teacher will be able to leave her job at around 12, 1, go back home, cook, take care of the family, rather than resuming like an educational path where she can take or consumes long hours in her career. And we don't really work on their skills, like negotiation skills, leadership skills, those skills that are needed for them to actually resume and take part in the public sphere. You have 75% believe that the lack of the support of women to other women affects the participation negatively. Because even as women, we don't really support each other. Women are actually, in this case, people who foster patriarchal norms. And the absence of this support amongst the absence of this support actually prevents other younger women from finding role models, from identifying role models, and also giving a positive example that women can actually contribute and participate in this field. And at the same time, those who actually achieved high positions do not, or the public feels that they have not done anything to achieve any milestone in terms of women's rights. Just because he's telling me time, so okay, but at the same time, the same people who were researched, they actually praised the civil society for their role. They strongly believe that the civil society has played a very positive role to encourage women to participate, to raise awareness on their rights, on participation. There are several initiatives that speak about raising awareness of 1325, empowering women who are already in councils to participate, to understand more the democratic process. But unfortunately, maybe it's due to lack of funding, or maybe because if the funding ends, there's no continuation for such projects, or maybe because donors, trends, civil society also follows donor trends at certain times. So there's uncontinuation of these things. And the two last points why women do not actually participate is that 71% believe that the problems is actually within the political party itself, that the political parties are so patriarchal and so controlled by men that it's really difficult to penetrate and to be able to get through to higher positions on the Palestinian side. And then it's also about the media, how the media perceives women and their role. It actually, again, ensures that women's role is actually more of the reproductive role rather than going out into the public sphere. Of course, and all of that leads us to one important conclusion, is that's why women are actually not presented in the negotiation teams. They were presented in the 1991 Madrid negotiations, but unfortunately right now the negotiation team has no significant female presence. And also if you look at the recent Gaza reconstruction conference that took place in Cairo after the recent Gaza war, there's actually also no female representation whatsoever, although the ones who were mostly affected were actually women and children in Gaza. So yeah, and this is maybe an open for everybody here to start thinking what we can actually do to ensure that we're actually including women in the decision processes and the political process as well. And thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Nivine, for all the information. We move now for Netta Loevy from Itach Maaki, which will speak about the Israeli side of the Resolution 1325.
Okay. Thank you very much. Does this work? No? Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me and for hosting this discussion, which I think that one of the optimistic things that I already that is already a turnout of this discussion is that it shows that it's not only for women, it's not only women's business, and as we see here, many male. So this is very nice, and it was very interesting to hear your lecture. A few words about Itach Maaki. Itach Maaki, Women Lawyers for Social Justice. This is the NGO that I'm working within as a lawyer. Itach Maaki is with you in Hebrew and Arabic. And we are an NGO, an advocacy NGO working since 2001 to advance the rights of women, especially those from marginalized communities, focusing on rights and voices of women from the social, ethnic, geographic, and economic periphery in Israel, women who are invisible to decision makers in public policy and legal fields, including Arab women, Orthodox women, women living in poverty, low-income workers, single mothers, and many other women. In this capacity, since 2008, Itach Maaki has been working to advance the implementation of 1325 UN Security Council resolution and the agenda of women, peace and security, focusing on the fact that the resolution was calling for the representation, the participation of women from different parts of society, from different groups of society, and not only from mainstream and leading groups in decision-making bodies. I think that Nivine described 1325 very thoroughly, so I will not repeat too much and I will not get too much into the resolution, but I will say that the resolution that was passed in the year 2000 by the United Nations Security Council, not a feminist body, was an historic resolution. It was historic by calling for a full and equal participation of women in all peace and security initiatives. It was historic because of its holistic approach dealing with representation and the need for representation alongside with the need for protection for women from violence, and including the mainstreaming of gender perspectives in the fields of peace and security. Since then, many countries have adopted a national action plan to implement 1325. Israel is not one of them, but I will say a few words about what did happen in Israel. In 2005, Israel adopted legislation that was inspired by UN resolution in the form of an amendment to the Equality of Women's Rights Law. With this legislation, Israel committed itself to ensuring proper representation of women on all national making committees, including committees that deal with peace and security. And in addition, this legislation Israel is committed for the first time that the representation will be of diverse women from all parts of society, and this became obligatory. Up until now, the implementation of this law is very partial. Over the years, women's organizations, Itach Maaki and other women's organizations in Israel have been pursuing the implementation of this law, and there's no doubt that it's not enough. So since during the years 2012 to 2014, a coalition of women's organizations, Israeli women's organizations, gathered for a process that took place over almost 3 years, in which they collaborated to form an action plan that was I have here a few copies of the action plan, but I will also be able through Liel to send you the action plan. It's an action plan written by these 40 organizations and activists, a civil society action plan to implement 1325 in Israel. And it includes requirements for specific actions of government bodies to advance participation in peace processes and decision-making, protection from violence, conflict prevention, and more. We submitted this document to the government. It was at the end of 2013, and then we had a big campaign, and we had involvement of many members of parliament in Israel, and also government officials who saw the potential of 1325. We even had a campaign with these safety pins saying 1325, and this is part of the campaign. And at the end of the campaign, at the end of 2014, the Israeli government adopted a resolution saying that it is committed to create an action plan for gender equality in the spirit of 1325 resolution principles. And in the explanatory appendix, it referred both to the 1325 resolution and to the civil society action plan as a significant influence on this decision. However, this was December 2014. It was 3 months before the last elections, and up until now, almost 2 years later, this historic and profound government decision has yet to be implemented. So before going to the next phase, which is our current phase, I will say that in the first phase we advanced 1325 through legal work, stressing legal means and tools. And the second phase was the policy, advancing policy change. And now we're combining both these two levels, but we're focusing on the grassroots level. This is a part of a project that Itach Maaki is leading together with Women Wage Peace movement. I think that maybe there are representatives from Women Wage Peace here, or maybe they will arrive, and with the Adam Institute for Peace and Democracy Education, because we believe that 1325 is a tool. It's a tool that gives, first of all, it gives sort of legitimacy for women to get involved and to influence the field of peace and security, and that is not an obvious thing.
Welcome, Ksenia Svetlova.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Nice to meet you. Because one of our priorities now is increasing the awareness of 1325 and its potential among diverse women's groups around Israel. So as part of this project, we are now recruiting 500 women from diverse groups of society, diverse backgrounds and different political views, and they undergo seminars that provide them with an acquaintance with the principles and potential of 1325 and allow them to dive into the discourse of peace and security, which in Israel, and not only in Israel, is, I would say, has barriers for women and doesn't allow women to participate in regularly. The legal and the international perspectives and the examples of women's influence on peace process provides them, the women that participate in our seminars, with a notion of legitimacy to speak and to demand to be part of the discourse and the decisions regarding peace and security. And they go through training that gives them the opportunity to deal with gender perspectives on issues of peace and security, to discuss feminine narratives of the conflict, and to examine the peace resolutions that are on the table with gender point of view. After the seminars, these 500 women in turn reach out to other women in their respective communities and deliver the messages and the tools they apprehend during the seminars. There are these women. Up until now, we had 3 seminars, so up until now 154 women participated in these seminars, and nowadays they are initiating the activities in order to spread the word around. We are having lectures they're initiating, screening relevant films, initiating discussions in their neighborhoods, towns, universities, classrooms, and workplace, participating in public decision and participating in public conferences and discussions in this field. One of the outcomes of this project is something that I think Nivine also mentioned, is creating sort of a movement of women speaking out, acting and supporting their peers on issues related to the conflict. The grassroots work will advance. We believe that it will advance both structural shift and also create a shift in beliefs and in behavior amongst women themselves. Nivine mentioned the criticism on the resolution itself, and all through the years we are now promoting 1325 for almost 8 years now. All through the years we were dealing, and we are still dealing with lots of criticism and many dilemmas, like what do women bring that is different to the negotiating table, and many questions and examples of women in Israel and all around the world who does not bring a different tune and does not sound different than men. So all these, I think all the discussion, and I think all the discussion that we're going to lead here, I don't think that we can have a discussion that lacks criticism or the dilemmas that are always in the room. But I think this is part of the things that we are dealing with these new rounds and circles of women. And in order for these new voices and perspectives to be heard and to be influential, we need to build the structure for the changes needed in decision-making bodies as well as in general public discourse. This is not, as I said in the beginning, this is not an issue only for women, as opposed, and it's not taken for granted. So our goal nowadays is to increase dramatically the circles of women in Israel society that participates in the peace and security discourse, and to make their voices and potential contribution penetrate and influence the decision-making bodies regarding peace.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Netta. I'd like to welcome Ksenia Svetlova to the table. Thank you very much for coming. Now we'll move from discussing